Here we are for another round of the 70s versus the 90s, and it's a wet and wild round when I put Peter Yates's The Deep against Danny Boyle's The Beach. And this one was a real interesting one. You know, both of these movies were very much on the same level. So let's just go ahead and dive right in, no pun intended, to the first one, Peter Yates's The Deep, which is based off of a novel by Peter Benchley, who also wrote the novel that Jaws is based off of, and he also co-writes the script here. And the film stars Nick Nolte and Jacqueline Bisset as two vacationing couple in Bermuda, and they're diving and they're looking for all this hidden treasure and stuff, and they find a ship that's a sunken ship that's not on the maps of anything, and then they discover like a whole bunch of morphine, and this kind of kicks off the action of the film. They get approached by a mysterious figure played by Lou Gossett Jr., who claims to be a glass aficionado and stuff, but really he's like the leader of a syndicate of drug dealers that are looking for that morphine. And it doesn't really kick into motion until Nick Nolte and Jacqueline Bisset go visit Robert Shaw, who is brilliant in the film. Kind of a tamer version of Quint, what he played in Jaws, but still chews the scenery in only a way that Robert Shaw can. And he's like an expert on the ocean. Wrote several books and mapping the ocean and everything. And then he ends up helping them look for all this stuff. But Willis, they're also being chased by the syndicate that Lou Gossett runs. And he's also into voodoo and stuff like that. They really go through the ringer. Because while they're out diving and checking for this stuff, Jacqueline Bisset gets some kind of weird voodoo ritual put on her and stuff as a way to scare her. And and then in the beginning nearly gets pulled under, kind of similar to what happened at the beginning of Jaws, just a little more, not as critical basically, but still go through the ringer. The film itself is a very exciting adventure film. Some of the best underwater cinematography that I've ever seen. Very thrilling and beautiful the way they shot it. And and the ending is pretty intense. That eel that pops out at you is pretty crazy. And then and that thing basically takes off Lou Gossett's head in the film, and then they blow it up and they get away with all the morphine and the gold and all this stuff. So they end up winning. Which is one of those things where it's like you kind of want them to at this point. After all the stuff that they went through. And then we move forward to Danny Boyle's The Beach, which has that dream team, the Danny Boyle directing, John Hodge writing the screenplay, and Andrew McDonald producing. The only thing you don't have now, since Shallow Grave, is Ewan McGregor. Instead, you get Leonardo DiCaprio, who's the lead character. He kind of sets everything in motion and in a way messes everything up for everybody. And he goes to Thailand to try to find himself, find adventure, all this stuff, and ends up stumbling upon a very eccentric character named Daffy, played by Robert Carlyle, most famous for playing Begbie in Trainspotting. And this dude, he's pretty wild. Gives him a joint. They're smoking, and then ends up killing himself. But before he kills himself, he leaves DiCaprio a map to this beach that is perfect island that he was telling him about, and that nobody knows about, nobody goes to. It's just people with real ideals, they settled down and all this stuff. And so DiCaprio meets this French couple and is like, you might as well go on an adventure and all this type of shit. Really, it's kind of a ruse because dude's just really trying to bang the hot French chick, and she is pretty stunning in the film. And they end up on the beach. Turns out there's a bunch of pot growers on there, but the other half of the island, they let the little beach resort that doesn't like beach resorts reside there, and that's led by Tilda Swinton, who they kind of take these three in just as long as nobody else knows. But what they don't know is that DiCaprio had made a copy of the map for somebody else, some people that got caught in the rain, and they gave him some beers. He's like, oh fuck it, I'll give him the map. I'm a fellow traveler, I should let him know all this shit. And so that also comes into play later, because think about DiCaprio, no matter what he's in, Leo will fuck your girl. It's no matter if he's on a boat, a beach, and hunting blood diamonds or something. No matter what he's doing, he's gonna be fucking your girl, and he does that. That he ends up banging Tilda Swinton as well. It's just it's a crazy mess, and all of his BS is what basically ruins Paradise, because it is essentially paradise. It's where every hipster adventurer wants to be. Away from people, closed off, but then also you still need all this other shit. So are you really living off the land? And the thing about it is with the beach, it's hard to critique something like that where it's definitely not as edgy as the novel. I haven't read the novel, but I hear like they made a lot of concessions for just because it was a big studio film, and can you really fault a film for that? It is the thing about Danny Boyle. He is like the Scorsese of the UK, so lesser material he can make seem a lot better. Also one of the few directors that can make voiceover work. With DiCaprio's voiceover, it's not as annoying. It does kind of, just it seems like him whining most of the time, but it does kind of help move the film along a bit. But the film doesn't necessarily go anywhere, as far as like, you see those other people get shot and killed, the ones that DiCaprio gave the map to later on. You see him go all feral and stuff because he's the one that has to make sure they don't get on the island and all this shit. But then the pot farmers end up killing them. And then honestly, the film would have been a lot better had like Tilda Swinton just shot DiCaprio. And then they would have had a reason to like go through some shit and leave that island, instead of just, they leave because she almost killed him. It's pretty fucking lame, and could have had the potential to go a lot further than it did. Because even like this one still, for all the stuff they go through, everybody else makes it out alive. There are those two that die from the shark attack and stuff. And here Leo, like he just had a little baby shark that he killed, and these dudes had to go up against real sharks. And so it's really just watching white people whine about not even getting their way in paradise. There are a few like nuggets of philosophy that really like drive the point home, but it's really nothing that nobody hadn't already seen before or heard before or even thought before. And then we get to see that ending of DiCaprio at an internet cafe, seeing the picture that the French chick sent him, and it's all look what it was when it was happy and all this shit, and he's smiling like a little dunce. And so this has clearly got to go to the deep, because we're, like I said, both of these movies are on the same level, but like at least the deep is not as douchey as the beach. With the deep you got Nick Nolte and Jacqueline Bisset and Robert Shaw. They're like fucking brilliant. Even Lou Gossett, Eli Wallach. Just the whole cast is great, and the movie itself is fun, and it's the kind of adventure film you want to watch on a Sunday afternoon. Whereas like the beach like has the potential to be great. The soundtrack is popping. And one thing about a Danny Boyle film is it's definitely high energy, but the people in this movie are such bullshit, and then the catharsis is bullshit. And so it's clearly got to go to the deep, where it's just like, everybody wins that needs to win. They fucking just do their thing. So for anybody keeping score, that's 36-30. 70s are up by 6. They're back kicking ass. It was looking like the 90s were going to come back and get them for a minute, but they're still kicking ass and taking names, because like I said, even their light entertainment, and mind you, shit that was made by the studios, they didn't really care about happy endings. And this was even at the time where they were starting to care about happy endings again, because I think The Deep was like 1978. So this is, right after Star Wars. And so, but you're still able to have gritty adult entertainment in your like fun adventure films. So like I said, anything that you disagree with or anything I've said that's wrong, feel free to let me know in the comments, eviscerate me. I don't care. This is a rough draft to a doctoral thesis. I don't have a life. This is all I do, spend my time doing and stuff. Plus, I got to know. It's a scientific obsession at this point, and we're seeing how it goes. But right now, it's 36-30, 70s up by 6. Your next main event will be The Exorcist versus Stigmata. And, of course, you will see these bonus rounds pop up here and there. So keep an eye out for it.